It's 1953. The British Empire is dying, gasping for relevance, drowning in debt after World War II. Its colonies are slipping away one by one. Its global authority is collapsing. And there is one thing Britain cannot afford to lose: oil. Far to the east lies Iran, a proud nation sitting on one of the richest oil reserves on earth. Oil that fuels ships, factories, economies, and empires. Oil that Britain does not own, but controls anyway. And when Iran dares to say, "Enough," Britain decides democracy is optional. This is the true story of the 1953 coup in Iran. A story of black gold, broken promises, and how a failing empire rewrote another nation's destiny from the shadows. For decades, Iran's oil was effectively British property. The Anglo-Iranian Oil Company ran everything: extraction, refining, exports, profits. Britain took the wealth. Iran took the pollution, the poverty, and the humiliation. Iranian workers earned pennies, while British executives lived like royalty behind gated compounds, with swimming pools and imported food. Iran supplied the oil that powered Britain's navy, its industry, its post-war recovery. Yet Iran itself remained poor. And the Iranian people knew it. By the late 1940s, anger was everywhere: universities, mosques, parliament halls. This wasn't radical extremism. This was nationalism. Pride. A simple demand for fairness. Then came a man history would later try to erase: Mohammad Mossadegh. Elderly, frail, educated in Europe. A believer in law, not violence. Mossadegh was not anti-Western. He admired democracy. He believed Iran could be sovereign without being hostile. In 1951, he was democratically elected prime minister. And he made one decision that shook the world. He nationalized Iran's oil. No guns. No mobs. No revolution. Just legislation passed by Iran's own parliament. To Iranians, it was liberation. To Britain, it was theft. Britain exploded with rage. Newspapers screamed. Politicians panicked. Losing Iranian oil meant losing power, prestige, and economic stability. Britain was no longer an empire, but oil made it feel like one. So Britain went to war. Not with soldiers. With pressure. First came lawsuits. Britain dragged Iran to international courts, claiming nationalization was illegal. They lost. Then came sanctions. Britain blocked Iranian oil exports globally, strangling Iran's economy. Tankers were threatened. Buyers were bullied. Iran's revenue collapsed. Still, Mossadegh refused to surrender. That's when Britain decided democracy had to go. British intelligence launched a smear campaign. Mossadegh was labeled unstable, emotional, a dictator in disguise. Most dangerously of all, he was branded a communist sympathizer. In the Cold War, that accusation was a death sentence. But Britain no longer had the strength to act alone. So it called Washington. At first, the United States hesitated. America had once opposed colonial exploitation. Some U.S. officials believed Iran had every right to its oil. Mossadegh was democratically elected. Overthrowing him felt wrong. Then Britain whispered the magic word: the Soviets! They warned that Iran would fall to communism. That Mossadegh would open the door to Moscow. That losing Iran meant losing the Middle East. Fear won. And the CIA stepped in. Operation Ajax was born. No declaration of war. No invasion. Just manipulation perfected into an art. CIA operatives arrived with suitcases of cash. Iranian politicians were bribed. Military officers were bought. Newspaper editors were paid to print lies. Fake stories flooded Tehran. Claiming Mossadegh hated Islam, planned dictatorship, and was secretly aligned with communists. Street gangs were hired to riot. Some posed as communists, burning shops and chanting slogans to terrify the public. Others posed as royalists, creating chaos. Religious leaders were quietly encouraged to turn against Mossadegh. Iran was being psychologically dismantled. Meanwhile, the Shah, young, fearful, uncertain, was pressured to act. Mossadegh had limited his powers constitutionally. The Shah hesitated, panicked, and briefly fled the country. For a moment, the coup nearly failed. But the CIA doubled down. On August 19, 1953, Tehran exploded. Paid mobs filled the streets. Tanks rolled in. Military units switched sides. Mossadegh's home was attacked. His supporters were crushed. By nightfall, Iran's democracy was dead. Mossadegh was arrested, humiliated, tried in a military court, and sentenced to solitary house arrest. He would spend the rest of his life confined, forbidden even to be mourned publicly after his death. The Shah returned, not as a constitutional monarch, but as an absolute ruler backed by foreign power. Britain got what it wanted. Iran's oil was reorganized. British companies returned, now sharing profits with American corporations. Iran received a larger percentage, but ownership was an illusion. Control was gone. The lesson was brutal and unmistakable. Democracy is acceptable only when it obeys empire. For the United States, the coup was celebrated internally as a masterpiece of covert action. For Britain, it was a lifeline to relevance. For Iran, it was trauma. Over the next 25 years, the Shah ruled with increasing repression. His secret police, SAVAK, trained and supported by the CIA, imprisoned, tortured, and silenced dissidents. Elections became theater. Opposition vanished. Western companies thrived. On the surface, Iran modernized. Underneath, resentment festered. Every prison cell, every tortured student, every silenced journalist traced back to 1953. Iranians learned a painful truth. When they chose democracy, it was destroyed by outsiders. That memory never faded. In 1979, it detonated. The Iranian Revolution overthrew the Shah. But the revolution did not restore democracy. It replaced one trauma with another. Anti-Western rage became its fuel. The U.S. Embassy hostage crisis. The chance. The permanent hostility. The roots of it all lead back to one moment, when oil mattered more than freedom. Even decades later, the truth remained buried. Britain denied involvement. Documents stayed classified. The story was dismissed as conspiracy. Only years later did the CIA quietly admit its role. Britain never truly apologized. Because admitting the truth would mean admitting that the modern world was built not on values, but on oil, fear, and control. And here's the most disturbing part. Iran was not unique. This was a prototype. Guatemala, Chile, Congo, Indonesia. The same pattern repeated. A nation asserts independence. Economic interests feel threatened. Democracy is labeled dangerous. A covert operation follows. 1953 wasn't an accident. It was a warning. So when people ask why Iran mistrusts the West, why anger runs so deep, why history still bleeds into the present, this is why. A nation tried democracy, and the world crushed it for black gold. If this story made you uncomfortable, good. If it made you angry, even better. Because history only repeats when it's forgotten. And 1953 was never meant to be remembered.